Relax your arms, open your eyes. How's everyone doing? Good? Cool. Everyone muted. Okay, cool. Everyone muted themselves. They're on point. All right, Charmaine is here. Antoine's here. Everyone feeling good? Everyone good? Well rested? Sweet.
Any questions from yesterday at all?
Neil, no. Neither am I. I need about a week of sleep.
I do have one question.
Yeah, come on, bring it on.
I do have a quick question.
Yeah, go ahead.
You're going to break down tree today? No, I'm just kidding. I just want to make sure I wrote this down right.
I was furious.
I was so mad.
Sorry, Susan, go ahead.
It took like a whole 3 minutes, as John. I want to make sure I write isometric movement will not be enough to warm up the body before it's needed for back ends. Is that correct? That's why we have to do pulsing actions as well as isometric movements?
Ideally. Yeah, Susan, ideally. I mean, it's one of those things where you could do it and it will warm it to some degree, but the best roadmap for that is to do flexion of the trunk before you go into the deep back bending in step 6. I've been in classes before where the teacher was running out of time. They did one like isometric hold where they did forearm plank for however long, and then took us right into 6. And I didn't implode or anything. I didn't die from it. My core didn't fall apart. So it's one of those things where like we shoot for the ideal, and if circumstances happen where we have to shift it for whatever reason, it's not going to kill everybody. But that's what we're shooting for, is the flexion of the trunk before the big opening in 6.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything else? All right, cool. So today we're going to talk about we'll see how far we get into it, but we're going to talk about the rest of the 8-limb path. And then that'll take us right to the practice. We'll do the same thing. We'll jump off this Zoom room. We'll jump on the other one. We'll do the practice. We'll jump off that one. We'll jump back on this one. We'll meditate, and then we'll take a quick break, or not a quick break. You know what I'm saying?
So I told you guys we were going to clinic this morning, and Chris and I had some talk this morning and decided it's probably a better shift to go over 8-limb path this morning and then practice, and then we'll clinic tonight. I think it'll save our bodies a little bit too. Jumping right into clinicking, making this guy go upside down right away is wouldn't be a good thing. He'd be angry the rest of the day.
It would be happening to me.
Totally.
For me.
Okay.
So at this point, we've talked about the yamas and the niyamas, and as far as yoga is concerned, those are kind of like the ethical principles. I say, I think in every spiritual tradition, religion, or whatever, they have like, hey, this is how you should live a good life. Like most of them do, right? I look at these as like not do's and don'ts, thou shalt and thou shalt nots, right? But more so in like, these are guidelines that help make life like simpler and more engaging, right? And more like, but really it simplifies the complexity of life if we're coming from love, if we're being honest. Just in that one, you all know, like if you've made like told a lie and then you held by it, and all of a sudden the amount of like lies that have to be stacked on top of that one, like over time is like, I don't remember what I said. And my point is like, just that one, just being truthful, it simplifies all of life. And for me, as like someone who's like, I care so much about what other people feel and how they're feeling, and that my actions aren't hurting them in any way. Like I will justify lying Literally, like even little white lies. I'll justify lying so that they don't have to have their lives adversely affected by my choices. Does that make sense? But that it adds complexity because I'm not being truthful to myself or them. And then truth, Martin Luther King said, this truth pressed to the earth shall rise again. It's going to come back. And at some point, my point is like the guidelines, what we've been so far, the design of it is to make life simpler and to allow us to live more like passionate, purposeful, open-hearted experiences of living. Does that make sense? So we're very clear, like we're not telling you to do it or not do it, but test it, see how it works, be more loving, be more kind, see how that relates to like how people relate to you then, be more truthful, see how your life feels then, be more moderate, like be in the middle and see how passionate life happens then, and then you get to tweak it to your experience. Does that make sense?
I was watching Jim Gaffigan. Everyone know Jim Gaffigan, comedian? If you don't, you have to check out his stuff. He's phenomenal. So he had a stand-up. He was talking about in his stand-up that I was watching. He was talking about lying, and he was like, "We all lie. We just do. I mean, think about it." He was like, think about it. I lie to my kids all the time. He was like, "This ice cream is spicy. Now go to sleep so I can wrestle your mom." It was hilarious. But what he's saying is like, we in this world, we navigate like the times of like, there are things like, especially with my kids, I have to not tell them the entire truth, right? But then also not lie at the same time. There's a constant navigation of, or if you're gonna like hurt somebody, like telling them the truth is actually gonna hurt them. We have to navigate how do I explain to them, how do I tell them just enough to not hurt them, in whatever case in a scenario. But this is the challenge of it, right? And it's exactly what we were talking about before, because we want it to be black and white, right? To make it easy. But the reality is there's so much gray, even in nonviolence, right? Even with the hymns of nonviolence, there's so much gray. I'm like, okay, yes, I understand this principle of nonviolence. And if a mosquito lands on me, I'm gonna kill it, right? I'm gonna slap it and kill it, right? And then some of you like have different levels of, if it's a spider, do you kill it or do you catch it and throw it outside? Well, it depends what time of day is it, right? If I find a spider at 3 a.m. and I'm like on my way to bed, I'm like, all right, do I catch this thing and put it outside or do I kill it? Or a cockroach or whatever the animal, like we have levels of gray. You guys get what I'm going here? And so we have to navigate this life of, and some people are like, no, I'm all on one side. There's a sect called breatharians where they're so established in nonviolence that even breathing, there's microscopic organisms that are alive that live in the air, and when you breathe, you kill those microscopic organisms. And so their whole thing is they wear these masks. It's kind of relevant to now, but they wear these masks so that they don't kill these microscopic organisms. Right? It's like where do you land on all of these spectrums of these principles? And we all have them, but my feeling for me personally is I want, like, nonviolence is the guideline through it, and yet I'll kill a mosquito or kill a cockroach, right? So anyway, so we have these extremes that we can go to, and it's always about finding what is the middle path. What is the middle path for me? Telling my kids that the ice cream is spicy, so I can eat it. Does that make sense, guys? Yes.
Okay, so then we get into the next limb. Go ahead, John, take it. I'm going to finish this up.
Yeah. So we have the yamas and niyamas, like the ways that help us navigate through the world, right? When we follow those principles, we have less drama in our life. We have less intensity in our life. It helps us live a simpler path in life, I guess I should say. Now, when from here, after the yamas and the niyamas, it's a sequential order to self-realization, according to the sage Patanjali. And what he codified were these steps, right? And so what he looked at when he did the 8-limb path, he said, okay, if I teach people a way of living that allows them to find peace, then the next steps will be easier to follow. And the next steps to follow are a sequential path to enlightenment. Right? And so the very next one that he talks about is asana. Right? And so and when he talks about asana, he's not talking about postures. He's not talking about warrior ones, warrior twos. He's talking about actually sitting down in a meditative seat. And one of the main things he says with that is find an effortless seat. Let me read it exactly because it's in there. All right, so if you want to follow along, spiritual principles. Turn to your spiritual principles, and it's page 10 in your manual. He starts by saying, or we start by saying, in the Yoga Sutra, Patanjali only wrote 3 aphorisms on the topic of asana. Asana is to be seated in a position which is firm but relaxed. Firm but relaxed. Asana is perfect firmness of body, steadiness of intelligence, and benevolence of spirit. Perfection in asana is achieved when the effort to perform it becomes effortless, when the infinite being within is reached. So he goes on to say, or we go on to say.
Yeah, he did not go on to write this next part that Sean did.
No, we did. One of the true goals of asana is to cultivate a body that is steady, sensitive, and aware. According to Patanjali, asana was only practiced in the service of meditation, literally to take a seat. Asana in post-classical times developed in a much more expansive way and has many benefits. Just like Patanjali's time, it can be a wonderful tool in its supporting the practitioner's meditation practice. Asana reconnects the mind-body relationship, which is the first step in moving toward the development of pure awareness. One of the many side effects of asana practice is total health. These systems of movement work the entire body from head to toe, inside out. They flush toxins from every organ and tissue, build density in the skeletal system, coordinate the brain-body connection, build amazing strength, and create flexibility through every joint and muscle. However, it's important that the practitioner does not become too engrossed in the purely physical aspects and lose sight of the true goal of the practice, connection with the infinite being within. Tavi George says, yoga is 99% practice and 1% theory.
So the real key with this is just to understand that at this point in time, when Patanjali's writing this, it was yoga was meditation. Asana was to take a seat. What's really interesting is it's 1,000 years later, about 1,000 years, 800 to 1,000 years later.
Say 400.
When asana started becoming more about poses, the first written text was the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, and even in that, there was they talked about 15 poses. 11 of them, 14 poses, sorry. 11 of them were just different variations of seated meditation. So even when asana began to expand, well over 80% was still all about meditation. Now, the way we look at asana now is man, it's so valuable. Yes, people feel physically, for the myofascial lines, it is way of keeping your body feeling strong and flexible and useful. It also, though, the way we look at it is a wonderful preparation for meditation, because the best way to change your state, the quickest way, I should say, to change your state is to move your body. If you want to change your state, move your body. And so if we move our body prior to meditation, we'll have a more successful experience stabilizing the mind because our state has changed. You all know this, you have the visceral experience of it when you have practiced or you've been living your life and you came into practice. You didn't meditate, although I would argue that asana practice is a meditation on the body and the breath, right? It's a moving meditation. But what happens from being stressed and having one of those days to going onto your mat and practicing was literally a movement that changed your state. Now, so we're looking at asana in 2 different ways. 1, it's meditation. 2, it's actually movement, what we do on our mats. But what we do on our mats actually supports meditation as well. Does that make sense? That's our interpretation so we're looking at Patanjali right now. We're looking at classical yoga. It's purely meditation. Please understand that. But now we're also looking at this, our modern day view of what yoga, what asana has become, and it's how beneficial it is, not just for the body, but also for the mind in preparation for meditation. Does that make sense? Any questions on that at all? You can throw it in the chat or unmute yourself if you like. And everyone's seeing us. Everyone's good seeing us. I know I hadn't muted everyone. Everyone's good. Okay. Logistic, camera stuff, all good. Awesome.
So I think with asana, one of the where modern day yoga is taking asana, unfortunately, is into this idea of gymnastics, where what's being spouted is if you do more poses, more advanced poses, you'll find what you're looking for. You'll find this balance in life. You'll find that you have better relationships and more tolerance and better diet, and all of these things will all of a sudden suddenly appear. And so we, as practitioners, instead of spending time diving into meditation, we spend more time diving into more challenging poses. And I want to be clear here. We love practicing. We love playing with the body and doing inversion, doing that stuff, right? So there's nothing wrong with that at all. You're like, no, I really love that side of it. Totally cool. But what's happening with social media and when people look up what yoga is, they see people doing crazy stuff, right? Whether it's a video or a picture, they see people doing crazy stuff. And they're like, oh, that's yoga. And what it really is there's a level of mastery of the body, but really it's moving more into this idea of gymnastics. And if you take someone that's been sitting on the couch for 20 years hanging out, and then all of a sudden they're like, well, I want to get my body feeling better, and they get thrown into a pure Ashtanga class, they're most likely going to hurt themselves. Like, oh yeah, I tried yoga, it doesn't work. And if the teacher isn't understanding like the deeper aspect of this practice to create a sense of youth in the body, so to approach the practice in a way that follows a myofascial methodology, so that the people that are newer to the practice and maybe newer to moving their bodies, they're being guided through the practice in a way that allows them to create that youth in their body in a systematic, safe way. Right? This is so extremely important, because if yoga is all about gymnastics, what we're going to see is it's only 20-year-olds are surviving this thing. Right? It's it's not going to work. And as teachers, we also need to guide people into this understanding that the just as important as maintaining youth is the awareness that it develops. Because that awareness is, for most people, the very first time that they're experiencing the difference between the constant chatter of the mind, which we talked about yesterday, where they think this chatter that's going on all the time is them, right? And pure awareness. And that there's actually a gap that we can create. And the asana practice, just as important as keeping youth in the body is how quickly it can create that gap for people. For people that have never in their lives experienced that there is a difference between the chatter of the mind, the monkey mind, or whatever you want to call it, the constant thinking, and pure awareness, their true self, right? This is so powerful. This is one of those powerful things about asanas that gives them very quickly that experience where they're moving their body and we're focused. We're helping them to focus their mind on the practice. Put your hand here, put your foot here, take your arms here, do this, feel, do this, remember to breathe, do this, now feel, do this, remember to breathe. And at the very end, they're lying in Shavasana and they're having glimpses of meditation, glimpses of stillness, glimpses of pure awareness. That is so powerful, guys, because all of a sudden it's possible. I'm not this constant chatter in my mind. It's possible to be still. It's possible to hit the mute button for my mind. Chris and I were in the same boat when we first started practicing. We thought it was all about asana. And that if I do more advanced poses, I'll have a better life. Everything will fall into place. Now, it does help a lot of times because it creates, but it's not doing more advanced poses. It's the awareness that the practice creates that helps start to spread into other areas of our life. But we can help people hyperdrive that if we can then guide them into a meditation practice. Meditation practice is the rocket fuel for that experience, guys. But if you take somebody that's never done asana, sit them on a cushion and say, okay, stop thinking, pay attention to this anchor, you're going to have this gap in this experience, they'll go a little crazy, right? Because all of a sudden they may start to notice how much they think, they may start and not really have the tools to separate that and create that gap, right? This is why asana is such an important piece to this whole practice.
Yeah. Ben put a great quote. This is from The Body Keeps the Score. I'll read it to everyone. It says, "The imprints of the past can be transformed by having physical experiences that contradict the helplessness, rage, and collapse that are a part of trauma, which can be used to regain self-mastery." It's from The Body Keeps the Score. There's a great book that alludes to that too. Like, that book is wonderful. Carolyn Mace's book, Anatomy of the Spirit. She's saying the same thing, just in different terms, that our biography is in our biology. Our past literally is embedded, like the information of our past is embedded in our tissues. There's a cool saying, our issues are in our tissues, right? We hold them. So now look at that, like literally, physically in our body. Whether you're talking about it energetically from like patterns of thought and patterns of feeling that we don't want to feel, so we push down, or like actual trauma that has been literally woven into the fabric of our DNA because of those past experiences. Now frame that in, now I'm moving and I'm feeling strong and I'm feeling powerful. This is why it contradicts the helplessness, because you are physically moving your body in a way that triggers emotion. This is what we talked about in the immersion, is that we're physical, we're mental, we're emotional. And someone's like, why aren't we spiritual? Yeah, but that's the ground. That's us, that's who we are. The way in which, the vehicle in which we experience the spiritual is through the physical, the mental, and the emotional. And this is like our pitch for asana, because people have their biographies are in their biologies, we get them on the mat and we get them, and I'll talk about your question in a second, Allison, the warrior pose, right? The strong, powerful experience of being grounded in your feet, of being focused. For some people, it's the first time they've ever felt that sense of power, of strength. And what happens is it then begins to rewire the experience of trauma that's been held in their bodies, because they're now physically experiencing an emotion, a quality that they've never experienced before. Does that make sense? It's so fucking powerful. That's why get people on the mat, get them moving their bodies to change their state, but also to give them a physical experience of something that they may have never felt before in their lives. But at some point, that may be it. That's why we're like, but at some point, man, get on the meditation cushion, because then you're sitting with yourself directly. Then the practice of asana on the mat doesn't become an escape for something that you're not wanting to see in your life. Does that make sense, everybody?
I got to comment on that, Chris.
Yeah.
I think there's an observation that I've had over the time, especially in my community, and with super high energy A-type personalities, especially men. But there's a lot of people who use the gym for therapy. Crush themselves, breathe fire. I thought that I was, like, me personally, my experience, I thought that I was like dealing with things positively through the gym for a long time. I think a lot of us have experienced that. But what I thought that I was doing was what the body, that book is talking about. I thought that I was having positive experiences, but what I was really doing was reinforcing negative energy inside my body with using my own memories and emotions to fuel my workouts, thereby reinforcing all that trauma, reinforcing all that negative energy inside of me. And I wasn't going anywhere except having overuse injuries, metabolic injuries, just running myself in the ground. And I think I know people use yoga like that too. And I think as we teach people and run into people and try to guide them through this process, we're going to run into people who think that they're doing it for the right reason, but they're not, or they're crushing themselves. And I spent years doing that, and I'm just starting to come out of that. So I think that's a pretty valuable thing to recognize in students when we see it.
Yeah.
Good point, man.
And Ben, I just want to highlight that experience that you had is going to be your superpower. to one, acknowledge it and see it in somebody and relate to them so that you can help them overcome it. What you think is a weakness is actually your power. And so I just want to be clear, like whatever you think is like holding you back in your asana practice is actually going to be your superpower, because you're going to be able to relate to the people who struggle with that in whatever form or fashion that ends up being, in ways that I'll never be able to, or John will never be able to.
Well, I hope I also have the superpower for awesome playlists.
Yeah, there you go.
My wife has one of those. But to that point, man, it's a really great point that I want to bring up, and we'll jump into Allison's question in a second. When Chris and I, so when I was in, I think I was 18 or 19, I started martial arts, and I was looking for a way to channel some of the anger and aggression that I had towards my dad and the craziness that he caused in my family, right? And so about a year later, I pulled Chris into martial arts, and we started training, and it was exactly what Ben just described. Like when we would train harder and harder and harder, and felt like, oh, this is good. We're getting the release. We're getting this shit out. You know, all this intensity that we experienced when we were from our childhood that was stored up. We were channeling it and getting it out, and we'd have these intense practices and feel good, and then we'd have to go back and get intense practice and feel good. And we thought, okay, this is working. And then I was working with a nutrition coach. I've probably told you guys this story already, so bear with me. I was working with a nutrition coach at the time. This guy was like, he was almost 90 years old. He'd been working with nutrition his whole life, and he was he was kind of crazy, but in a good way. You know, he was like, his wife had passed away. Like when I first met him, I was working with him for like 3 or 4 years or something. And he started dating, and like, he was telling me about his sex life a little bit. Like almost 90 years old, totally independent, driving, doing his thing. And he was just on fire for an old gentleman. So I learned a bunch of stuff from him, but he was like, John, you got to try out hair analysis test, because when you take the hair analysis, your hair has everything stored, your biography and your biology, right? But everything that for the last like 6 months, depending on how long the hair is, it can give you great feedback. So I was like, all right, cool. And I did it, got the test back, guys. And that was the key of, holy shit, this intense martial arts stuff isn't actually doing what I thought it was doing. The test came back and said that I was on the verge of acute stress disorder, and that if I don't shift something in my life, whatever the major stressor is in my life, I'm going down the path of health failure, basically. And that was the trigger at that point of like, holy shit, I got to shift something. And Chris and I obviously were training all the time, so he was probably on the same path. But that was the linchpin that shifted us into trying yoga and doing something that balanced that out. Because the whole idea was exactly what Ben described. It's like, oh, we're working it out at the gym. We're working it out in the martial arts studio. We're working it out on the mat. We're working it out hitting pads and hitting heavy bags. We're working it out all out, and it's all good. I didn't feel stressed out, right? But we were dropping ourselves into this sympathetic nervous system response, this fight or flight response repeatedly every single time, just like Ben's describing, that people go to the gym, they drop themselves in the sympathetic nervous system response and grind out what's going on in here. And so what we were doing, we were grinding out what was going on in there, thinking, this is good. Now, better way of channeling that energy than to go to alcohol or something else, right? So it's a better way of channeling energy, but it wasn't doing what we thought it was doing, right? And this is when the shift happened for us with yoga, and real healing started to happen, because now we're working with getting ourselves shifted into the parasympathetic nervous system, right? The rest, the restore, the digest side of the nervous system, and patterning our bodies to land in that state more often, right? With peaks of sympathetic nervous system response here or there when projects need to be done. But that was one of the keys. It was exactly what you were describing, Ben.
So, Allison, where did the postures come from? It really depends. When you look back at yoga, as far as like how modern day yoga formed, you have basically two lineages. You have a lineage that was formed by Krishnamacharya and one that was formed by Vishnu Ghosh. Krishnamacharya, so this is interesting because many people think of like, oh, yoga is such an Eastern practice. Yeah, when you take it back to meditation, it is a very Eastern practice. But the moment you start adding, and this is beyond like, so Hatha Yoga Pradipika is still super Eastern practice. I mean, it's still mostly, you know, the majority meditation. Now introduce Krishnamacharya and Vishnu Ghosh. They were in India at the time, which was being influenced by the British Empire. Krishnamacharya's influence was gymnastics. Now think about this. Krishnamacharya trained Pattabhi Jois, Iyengar, his son Desikachar, and a number of other people. Man, I need to turn off my notifications. So if you look at Ashtanga, which is what Pattabhi Jois created, he created a vinyasa system. When you look at the higher levels of vinyasa system, it's gymnastics. Yes? Right? Look at, I mean, some of the float throughs and the press ups and all that stuff, that's gymnastics.
And even Krishnamacharya developed a vinyasa system, vinyasa krama, he called it, in his system. But the emperor, that's probably not the right word, the king, whoever it was in India at the time, took Krishnamacharya into the palace to train these group of younger boys, basically. And he started to develop this yoga system. Later, after this took fire, he said his whole focus was, I'm going to develop a system. Now think about this, right? Because they're being ruled by the British Empire. He's like, I'm going to develop a system of exercise that is unique to India, that is unique to my culture. This was the true birth of yoga asana as we know it today.
So when you look at where it came from, who it was really designed for was like 12 to 14-year-old prepubescent boys. So take Ashtanga, right? And now here I am, I've been sedentary most of my life. I'm a woman, right? And I'm jumping into Ashtanga to heal myself because I've heard it's got good stress relieving properties. And the first thing I do is I jump back into a chaturanga. Like, how is that gonna help me? But I'm not downing it, but the question is so good because if you don't know where it came from and why it was developed, then you don't have an understanding of what you're getting yourself into and if it's actually right for you or not. So that was,
yeah, I'll just add to that. And you hear teachers talk about these poses that we do that are thousands of years old. We're doing these poses that the ancient yogis from 3,000 or 4,000 or 5,000 years ago were doing, and to channel the energy in such a certain way. And the reality is it's not.
Wrong.
They weren't. You know, these poses, literally the majority of the poses that we do on our mats in the practice were developed in the late 1800s and early 1900s. So they're really only 150 maybe years old.
So if you look at Vishnu Ghosh was influenced by weightlifting. His whole design, what he wanted was to create and sculpt the perfect body.
Again, influenced by the British Empire when he was seeing these Brits doing, lifting weights. It was like, I want to sculpt the perfect body. I'll create poses that are similar to what you would experience with weightlifting. That's why the stationary poses held for a longer time. That's where that influence came in.
Yeah. Also, where they were developed, different areas of India, one colder, one hotter. And so what happened for Krishnamacharya is they needed more movement and more strong Ujjayi breath to build and cultivate the heat, where Vishnu Ghosh was in Calcutta on the Bengal Sea, hot and humid, literally all year round. And so they didn't need the movement. The heat was already embedded in the climate. So then you look at what happened with Bikram taking basically Vishnu Ghosh's system. Bikram did not create that system. He took it from Vishnu Ghosh and brought it to the West and realized he didn't have the heat. And therein, when he put heaters in the first room, hot yoga was born. So if you look at why you're learning what you're learning, we have vinyasa, flow, stability, niyata, the two systems from the two lineages influenced by more modern day science of movement and understanding of myofascial methodology, but also with this like, oh, what we learned was like, oh, the stability class, the Nyata class is so good for beginners to have like a strong, powerful, safe experience because the movements are slower paced, longer holds, right? It makes it challenging, but more accessible. And then you have the vinyasa. Well, we love the heat, so we do everything in heat. Well, not online, you can't, but my point is, what also happened is and from our teachers and the teachers before them, started blending better alignment into flow, taking vertical stabilization and saying, oh, you know what? We need to apply this to flow, because prior to that, it wasn't. Maybe you've taken like vinyasa classes where there is no alignment. It's basically just do this pose, do that pose, do this pose, do that pose.
Or traditional Ashtanga class, which is literally call the pose, and actually call the pose in Sanskrit. Call the pose in Sanskrit, right? And that's it.
Yeah, and so as far as the question of like why Warrior One, I don't know originally why it was all done, but I can take the myofascial methodology and understand why it needs to be done and why it is where it is now, Allison.
And there was also
basically it. There's cool stories about like
there's influence of the culture. So the culture interweaved into why they did certain poses, and that was really based on stories of the culture, you know, texts that they have in their culture that influenced what poses they wanted to do, and then it was nature, right? But they had, you know, like Garudasana, right? Garudasana is the eagle pose, but there's a story around the eagle god that and blah 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 blah, you know, or Vishnu the warrior. There's a whole story in their culture and lineage about that warrior.
Yeah, so Vyedra was like the warrior. So Virabhadrasana, one, is when he came out of the earth. There was this like epic tale where the princess was stolen from the king, and they called upon Vyedra to come get him back. And so he came out of the earth with his swords, Warrior One, and then he found the people. And Warrior Two, when you open up, chop their heads off. No shit, that's a story. And then that's Warrior Two. And then they grabbed the head, right? This is Warrior Three. Hold on. Warrior Three, and then dropped it in the fire. And then he took the princess back to the king. No shit, that's the story.
But think about
loving kindness. Mm-hmm. But I know your truth.
And put this into perspective. If I was teaching prepubescent boys how to do exercise, how smart is it to weave it into stories, right? So that they're engaged in wanting to practice with this exercise with me, right? It's so crazy. It's so crazy, like where it is now, and like yoga teachers are like, yes, and we're doing this because there was a God way back when, thousands of years ago, that did this, and we're doing it in honor of them. And like, nah, it was really someone's idea because they had to train a bunch of boys that had no attention span. So like, we're going to weave it into a tale about a warrior coming up from the ground and doing this and this and this. Then it took fire, and here we go. Now we're in the yoga world. But anyway.
Good question. Good question. Everyone good? Questions about that?
Is that helpful? Sorry to demystify it.
Yeah. Amanda, I used frozen influence yoga to get Emma interested. Yeah. My girls have been doing it. There's some British lady who has all these yoga things for kids, and they do like Moana yoga and frozen yoga. Yeah, it's pretty awesome. Okay, let's move on to the next one. By the end of the training, we're going to finish this 8-limb path. All right, so hold on, let me see. Real quick. Yeah. Yes, we are, Ben. Yes, we are. Okay, so let's talk about pranayama. And this is in the Yoga Sutra. It says, as realization dawns, the distinction between breathing in and out falls away. Then the veil lifts from the mind's luminosity, and the mind is now fit for concentration. Prana means energy. Yama means to lengthen. Pranayama is the conscious control of breath, and through this control, we are lengthening or manipulating the energy of the body. Pranayama is the process of switching off the life force from the 5 senses. The body is still, the muscles have stopped working, venous blood is reduced, the heart slows down, and the energy in the heart becomes quiet. A state of peace is achieved. And Iyengar wrote, prana is energy, ayama is creation, distribution, and maintenance. Pranayama is the science of breath, which leads to the creation, distribution, and maintenance of vital energy. Pranayama is the bridge between the physical and the spiritual. Hence, pranayama is the hub of yoga. This is another one where if you're talking purely classical of what Patanjali wrote down, he only had basically like 2 aphorisms about breath. Later, during the Hatha Yoga Pradipika era, that's when all of these different pranayama techniques, all these different breathing techniques started being developed. Back in the day, in Patanjali's time, during the time that we're talking about in classical yoga, essentially he said, listen, breathe until the point where you can no longer distinguish an inhale from an exhale. What he's describing is a state of breathlessness. We've done this with you before. Remember when John in the training, like he'd start whispering and you were leaning in and you stopped breathing to pay attention? You guys remember that? No? We'll do it next time we're all together. I don't know if it'd work in this format. Anyway, you'll notice, and maybe like if you're trying to, what you can do is in your environment, not right now, but like close your eyes and try to listen to something super far away. And when you hear it, pay closer attention to it. When you do it, I'm going to give you the spoiler alert, you're not going to be breathing. Because at a certain point, even the breath, right? So remember, we're using it as an anchor for concentration. We'll talk about that in a moment. But what's happening at deeper levels of awareness and stillness, the breath ceases because even the breath becomes a disturbance, a distraction. And we're going to give you these experiences of breathlessness. If you've done other trainings or retreats with us, you've experienced it before. It's pretty phenomenal. But you'll experience the true experience of what Patanjali's talking about here, this state where you can no longer distinguish inhalations from exhalations, a state of pure breathlessness.
I'm going to demystify something again. He's talking about energy, about being able to control life force energy. And so like immediately when I first heard that, I was like, oh, that sounds super esoteric and like, whoa, what does that mean? And there are deeper levels of it, but very simply, it's where you bringing the energy of your concentration to. So let's all do this together. Let's just sit where you are, close your eyes for a moment, and then with your eyes closed, I want you to bring your attention to keep your eyes closed, but bring your attention to your eyes, to your vision with your eyes closed, and notice what you see. You may see black, you may see red, depending if there's light in front of it. You may see color flashing. Now, I want you to take that energy that you have at your eyes and bring it into your ears. And notice what you're hearing. Notice my voice. Notice the other sounds around you. Maybe the hum of the heater, or the air conditioner, or whatever you're in. The air blowing, you can hear that maybe. Maybe voices of your family faint in the background. And now, take that energy and draw it, let go of the ears, and bring that energy to the nose. And smell whatever it is that you smell in this moment. Inhaling through the nose and smelling your environment. Now, shift that energy to your mouth. Move your tongue around a little bit and taste whatever you taste in this moment. However your mouth tastes right now, taste it. Now, shift that energy now to your hands, your fingers. Don't move them, just hold them still. Just hold them still. Feel just your thumbs. And now draw that energy to the tips of your thumbs. Feel the tips of your thumbs. And now feel the tips of your other fingers. Just the tips. And now take that energy out of your hands and bring it into your feet. Feel your feet. And now draw that energy to the big toes. Just feel the big toes. Now, what I want you to notice as your attention is in your big toes, how you no longer smell the moment, how you no longer taste the moment, how you no longer see the blacks in the backs of the eyes, how you almost no longer hear, besides my voice. How you're literally controlling the energy of your body, the energy of your attention. Take a long inhale and a long exhale. And then gently open your eyes. So that little exercise is this idea of pranayama. How when we channel our energy into one area, it shuts off the sense telephones. How we're able to turn those sense telephones off and direct our energy, literally control our energy to one point. And in this case, most of the time, the point is, I'm going to listen to my breath. I'm going to feel my breath. I'm going to let my breath be the anchor. And that maybe, pranayama techniques are simply anchors for our attention. So that anchor, a lot of times it is breath, but it could be something else, obviously. We've talked about that, affirmations or maybe open monitoring, things like that. So, but this is the idea behind pranayama, guys, is that when we are able to understand that we do have control over where we direct our energy, over our ability to control our energy, our ability to control our attention, we then can move into deeper states of awareness. Questions on that? Was that helpful?
Yeah, so Elizabeth, I especially particularly when I brought my attention to my fingertips, I felt a tingling happening, and my toe tips. It's also, there's a lot of nerve endings there. There's like literally, because obviously our hands are so important. But yeah, you'll bring, this is really important, why that was so valuable. Everyone got caught like how you can literally transfer your energy, your attention to different areas of your body. This is important because what's going to happen next is we're going to talk about pratyahara, which is withdrawing and pulling that attention within. So any questions? Pulse of my fingers and toes when my energy was there. Yeah, me too, Melody. Yes, that was pretty cool. Yeah, right?
Totally, man. That was good.
That's good stuff. Read the chat if you didn't see it. Mary Ann's comment is awesome. Okay, so everyone good on pranayama? All right, let's transition to pratyahara. All right. So pratyahara, I think you got this one, John.
Okay, so withdrawing the senses, mind, and consciousness from contact with external objects, and then drawing them inward towards the seer is pratyahara, Yoga Sutra. Yogananda describes the senses like telephones. Not only are they constantly ringing, but they're simultaneously relaying information to us. From this information, the self identifies with the experience and seeks satisfaction in the external objects that feed it, forming attachments and aversions to those objects. The practice of pratyahara allows us to hang up those sense telephones and begin to draw our attention inward so that our attention is no longer divided and scattered in sights, sounds, tastes, smells, and contacts. Pratyahara is the first step on the higher path to samadhi. Rather than looking out the window, turn inside and gaze at the mystical mystery inside yourself with love and intimacy, rather than through lack. J.C. Peters.
So this is an important step. What ends up happening now, yeah, I'll get to that in just a second. So this is really important. What we're looking at with pratyahara is understanding that how we perceive the external world is through our senses, right? Through what John just kind of described as like, oh, bring your attention to your sights, your sounds, your smell, your taste. That's how we take in our world. And those, remember, we're talking about meditation here. When we're sitting in meditation, those sensory stimulations can become distractions. So as the whole process of pratyahara is interiorizing our attention within us. And so this is what's challenging. It's not to say you're not going to experience sounds, or even as you close your eyes, those little colorations for some people. But what we're doing is we're just not telling stories about them. It's really important because what we're saying in that is like, I'm not giving it any more of my attention than what it takes to perceive it. Does everyone catch that? It's super, super important. Meaning, and this is why what we call open monitoring meditation works. And because I can use my senses as an anchor and just hear. And in that moment, all I'm doing is allowing myself to receive the sound waves, literally energy, moving into my awareness and then moving out of my awareness.
Literally vibrating the little bones in the ears, moving in and then moving out.
Versus hearing a sound, triggering a thought, remembering an experience, telling myself a story about it, projecting out into the future about what it means for me in my life going forward, right? Way different than just receiving the information. What's happening when we're doing that is we're literally, this is what Yogananda said, Paramahansa Yogananda. By the way, the brother of Vishnu Ghosh was Yogananda. His given name was Mukunda Ghosh. So here we have one style and like the core of what meditation is all about from one family. Pretty interesting. So we're slowly hanging up each sense telephone. And hanging up is like, okay, so it's done. It's not the case. Unless you're in the sensory deprivation chamber, you're going to experience sensation. So what we're really saying with pratyahara in reality is just don't give it more of your attention than what it takes to perceive it in the first place. Because then what you're left with isn't sensory outside stimulation. You're left with what the mind produces, which is thought. And that will lead us into the next step, the next limb, which is concentration. Let me go to the chat. Yeah, Mary, this genius. One of my issues with how people talk about yoga is the concept of energy. Used in so many contexts that the meaning often is lost. This means a lot in the untethered soul. Yeah, exactly right, Ben.
It's the challenge of that. So if you guys don't where we're going, so Ben just wrote in the chat. I want to read it loud so you guys have context if you haven't mumbled it. Ben was saying one of my issues with how people talk about yoga is the concept of energy. It is used in so many contexts that the meaning of it gets lost or is lost. This happens a lot in the untethered soul, and this is one of the challenges. Like for Chris and I, it's one of the things we're like, we have to make it grounded. It has to be easy to understand and easy for people to take in, because otherwise the whole idea of yoga becomes, it's so esoteric. It's so like hippity dippity that I'm not even going to go there, which is such a fucking shame, because it doesn't allow people to get into this practice that can revolutionarily change their life, like dramatically shift everything. I'm preaching to the choir. You guys know this, but I have friends of mine that won't even go near it because of what Ben's described. Oh yeah, I'm gonna get on my mat and they're gonna say, oh yeah, feel your energy, and that energy has the ability to like let you walk through walls one day and blah blah. They're like, whoa, no. I'm dealing with a dysfunctional relationship. talk about how energy can help me with my dysfunctional relationship with my mom or dad, you know, like make it real for people, guys. When we're teaching yoga, this is so important for us. And this is obviously, you know, what we're teaching you guys is make it as real and grounded as possible. Make it as relatable as possible. That way people don't, there's no barrier. There's no like spiritual wall that's built up so that people have to fucking scale a wall and jump over a wall just to understand it, right? It makes it simple for them. And it's simple, like that exercise I did. That's why that energy exercise, like, no, here it is. Here's energy. Close your eyes. Bring your energy to your eyes. Bring your energy to your ears. Give them like that exercise. All of a sudden, oh yeah, I get it. Like my energy is also attention. If I bring my energy in my toes, I can actually feel the energy in my toes. I can feel it tingling. I can feel my attention, my consciousness is there. Right? If we can ground it, it makes it easier for people. And that way it doesn't create a wall, it creates a door so that people can easily walk through and get to this practice that can change their lives. That's my soapbox. Thanks, Ben.
Any questions about that? Anything energy-wise? Yeah, go ahead. Amy, go ahead. Oh, good. Okay, cool. You're good. Sweet. Yeah, and feel free to unmute yourself and just talk over us if you have something and we just move on. Okay, cool. So here we are. Think about where we've been. We talked about the ethical stuff. Good to go. We started about taking a seat. Then we have this pranayama, right? We focus our attention. All of a sudden, we're just not paying as much attention energetically to all of the stimulation around us. And then what are we left with? What's going on in here, right? And so it's the energy within our bodies, but literally thought energy. And by the way, 25% of your glucose is taken up every single day, like what the brain uses to burn up energy, with mental activity. Mental activity, 25% of your energy every single day, just on mental activity, right? And you know this to be true. If you've ever had to study for something and you're just like hitting the books hard, and all of a sudden you get up from it and you're exhausted, but you've had zero physical activity, right? You feel totally useless. It's simply because of how much you've been utilizing and focusing your brain power. Cool? All right, let me make sure. Say thumbs up. Okay, cool. Right on. Okay, so now this leads us to the next step, which is concentration. I'll read it and then we'll talk about it. Fixing the consciousness to one point or region is concentration. Ayandar. So as we release from sense distractions, we free up normally wasted mental energy and are able to focus our consciousness, our attention, in one direction. This is quite similar to the difference between a floodlight and a laser beam. Concentration is like a muscle. The more you work it, the stronger it gets. With practice comes the ability to fix attention on one subject and to then hold it there for longer and longer periods of time without distraction. The asanas are valuable tools in the development of concentration. However, the formal act of meditation is perhaps the single most effective way to increase our capacity to concentrate. And there's another quote by Vivekananda. The mind takes up various objects, runs into all sorts of things. That is the lower state. There is a higher state of mind when it takes up one subject and excludes all others. So here's the reality. When we say we're going to meditate, we're not meditating. We're concentrating. When you look at it in like the very specific definition of what's happening, we're just all in concentration. And we're actually going from, I'm concentrated, I'm distracted, I'm concentrated, I'm distracted, I'm concentrated, I'm distracted. When you're looking at what meditation actually really means at the higher level, what we're really doing, and it's all good because we need to build this. This is what's so important, is that we are focusing the mind, building the muscle every time we get distracted by a sense, some thought, but whether it's a sense, right, which we try to shut down from pratyahara, or whether it's just mental ruminations, the mind seeking stimulation, regardless, whatever it is, we focus, and that's distraction. Every time we get distracted and we choose to come back, we're going, I'm concentrating, boom, I'm distracted, I'm concentrating, boom, I'm distracted, I'm concentrating. Every time, it's a rep. It's a rep, it's a rep, it's a rep. You're building the muscle of your focus of attention so that you can begin to stay longer and longer and longer to one point. This is what's important. At this time, there is still a separation happening. This is really important because if you get this, you'll understand this so subtle, such nuanced transition between concentration to meditation. In concentration, here I am, there the anchor is. I am focusing on the anchor. I am breathing. There is my breath. Here I am. There's the breath. Here I am. Oh, I'm lost. Oh, back. Here's the breath. There I am. There's the breath. You guys catch that? Subject, object. Subject, object. It's good. That's how we start. We have to have an object of our focus to keep our focus, keep our mind stabilized. When you build that strength and you do it long enough, for longer periods of time, the effort to be focused on that thing becomes effortless. This is the subtle transition. And this is why I say that. Oh, let me pause for a second. You all know the process. You know this. You've just never done it in here. So most of us have this like totally flawed idea that it's not possible for us because we've just been so lost in our minds for so long. When you first started practicing yoga, there was a pose, it may still be your pose, that vexed you. That was your pose. You're like, man, I suck at this pose, right? And then you kept doing it, right? You kept doing it and doing it and doing it. And right now, because of the length of time and energy and effort you've put into doing that pose, the effort to perform it has become more effortless. Yes? Raise your hand. Yes? Everyone feel that physically, right? So important to recognize that because it means you are not incapable of making something that once was effortful to become effortless. And with that belief dispelled, we can now talk about meditation and you can look at it as a reality of potential for you in your life. Cool? It's really important.
What's fascinating to me, guys, is how, you know, Patanjali way back when dismantled this process into these subtle steps and these little steps of, okay, obviously I'll take a seat first, you got to do that. And then I need an anchor, breathing technique or whatever pranayama technique. I need an anchor to start to turn off these sense telephones. All right, I had the anchor, now my attention turns inward. Now all of a sudden I move from outside orientation to inside orientation. Now that my attention is drawn inward, now I can steady my focus and hold it to one point internally for a little bit, and then I just get distracted, and I come back, and then a little bit, and I get distracted, and I come back. But then what he's describing is what we're going to talk about next, is as that effort to hold my attention to one point, subject, me, object, whatever that point is, becomes effortless, the next shift happens. And this next shift, do you want me to hold circle on that? Okay. And this next shift is going to be the next limb. So I'm going to dive into it because this is going to help in the discussion because we're kind of moving that way. So, yeah, thanks, Chris. He's my cheerleader. Is Dhyana, right? Or Dhyana. A steady, continuous flow of attention directed towards the same point or region is meditation, Yoga Sutra. And so what Patanjali is describing is when the effort to hold our attention to that thing becomes effortless, there's a shift where we no longer, and what he'll describe in a minute, where we no longer drift, we no longer slip off of it. All of a sudden, it's effortlessness. I'll get into it. In concentration, we have an awareness of who and what. Who is concentrating and what the object of concentration is, the seer and the seen. As our attention becomes effortlessly absorbed in the object of our concentration, the seer dissolves. Concentration turns into meditation, where only the seen remains. We all have the ability to meditate, and we've all experienced moments of effortless absorption, looking into the eyes of a loved one, when time seemingly stands still as you express heartfelt passion, the sense of connection and awe that's experienced in nature, right? So this is what Patanjali is trying to describe with this, or what we're trying to describe about what Patanjali is explaining. With the loss of time comes the complete absence of ordinary identity. The personality that I feel myself to be dissolves beyond the material level. And with that, I lose the need for the landmarks that I've gathered since birth. Deepak Chopra.
Okay.
So this is when meditation actually happens. So just like anything, guys, in the build of it, just like the challenging pose, the pose you struggled with forever and ever, all of a sudden you have moments of hitting it, right? Moments of, oh, I got it. And then you fall out. And then you come back, do it again. You get moments of it, and then you fall out. Eventually, that pose that you had so much trouble with, all of a sudden you start to hit over and over and over and over again. And then eventually that pose becomes effortless. You're like, no, I got it. That's my, and for a lot of us, that ends up being your pose, right? No, this is my pose. I got this. It's on lockdown. Meditation is similar to that, where we are building up to this experience. So a lot of times we're in dharana, where we're concentrating and we fall out. We're concentrating, we fall out. We're concentrating, we fall out, and we keep trying, we keep building that muscle. But there is what you'll notice is it starts to get a little easier. You stay with it a little bit longer before you fall out, and you stay with it a little bit longer before you fall out. You stay with it a little bit longer, and then you hold and hold and hold, and eventually that becomes effortless. In the moment of effortlessness, in the moment where there's literally this transition of the object that I'm focusing on dissolves into just awareness, right? What Patanjali describes as the seer and the seen, and it's one of the things where it's hard to describe, it's hard to put words to, because it all of a sudden gets it can start to seem very esoteric, but it's a real experience of you drop into pure awareness. You guys have had that, and we are going to give you that experience at some point during the training, where there's just awareness. The object, whatever it is that you're anchoring yourself to create that awareness, dissolves, and there's just awareness. That's meditation. That's true meditation.
Have any of you had the experience meditating where like you drop in, and then immediately the mind's like, I think I did it. I think I'm here. Right? This is the same experience as you seeing a sunset. In the moment, it's like you turn a corner and you see the horizon, you see the sunset, and for a split second, you just experience the beauty. Literally, this is what meditation is. There was not you and there was not it. There was the moment. There was the experience where the sunset and your awareness of it merged. Then, after the fact, the mind clicks in and says, that's a beautiful sunset. And we think that to have this thing click in is what, it's like literally, there's a great analogy. It's like we're standing at the edge of a waterfall and life is just happening. It's just happening. And then after the fact, we're like, oh, look at that waterfall. Like, this doesn't need to be there to have experience. In fact, and oftentimes, it separates us from merging with the experience. This is what meditation is. Think about it. If nothing else catches you, it's merging. So you're not thinking about what's happening. You're just having. That's it. Yes, Susan, you asked the question, in practical, like the reality, is that in life practice, that's presence? Yeah, just presence. I am here in the experience, period. This is a challenging conversation because it's very easy to get it's so easy to slip into the spiritual talk that means nothing, that we can't wrap our heads around. It's so important that meditation, what it really is this experience of being in full participation with life. You're fully engaged. There's no mind involvement. There's no need for mind involvement. In fact, that's kind of the purpose, is getting your mind so focused that the thinker, the storyteller, goes into the background. And what comes forward is just the witnessing presence. Check this out. I think we've shown this before, but I wanted to write it because it's really relevant to right now. John, I'm going to hold it up because it won't stick anymore. Okay. Will you? Yeah. So check this out. The outer circle.
And I think it was Antoine that said it.
you know, when we have these states, it can be scary for the mind. Let me say it better this way. It can be scary for the apparent self, for the ego mind, right? Because it's literally the death of the ego. It's literally the ego gets stopped in that moment. And that part of us, all of our identities, all of our stories, all of the shit that we built up for our entire lives that feel real and feel like are part of us, all of a sudden dissolves. And so in that moment, if the mind clicks back in, it can feel terrifying, because all of a sudden all of our stories have just disappeared. Like, no, you are those stories. You are all of your shit. You're all of your dramas and your fears and all of your stuff. No, you can't go into that state of awareness where I don't exist anymore. That's you. And we can all of a sudden have this, very quickly have this fear kick in of, whoa, what happened? Right? Antoine said it in the chat a little bit. Yeah, it can be scary. So if you look at this, on the outer levels, the very outer level, we have sense perception. Disregard flashes of bliss. That was from a talk from something else. So we have sense perceptions. Is how do we pick up the world? Right? How do we perceive the world? I mean, obviously you can see the world. You can see outside of yourself. You can see the things around you. You're not the walls and like some teachers say, oh yes, we're all one because of the quantum field. Yeah, okay, to take that out of the picture, right? And the oneness of all things, but we can tell, okay, I'm not my computer, I'm not this mat I'm sitting on, I'm not my meditation cushion that I'm sitting on, right? Sense perception is how we see the world. That's what happens when pratyahara kicks in. We recognize, oh, that's not me. I don't have to pay attention to it. Yeah. And then we go inside. From turning off the sense telephones. So pranayama turns these off and pratyahara kicks in, and we interiorize our attention, right? So that's simple. The next level, right? The next inner circle are thoughts. Most people are stuck here because they think they're their thoughts. We think we are our thoughts. If you can turn them off, right? And you all have had experience of not thinking, and you didn't disappear, right? You didn't vaporize, right? So we can't actually be our thoughts. The thoughts are simply a construct, a patterning of consciousness, literally a construct of neurokinetic chains that we have put together over our lifetime. That we fire on a regular basis because it's way easier to fire neurosynaptic chains. It's way easier to fire these connections because they're already established. And for a lot of us, they have a sheathing called myelin that wraps around that makes it easier and more efficient to fire these patterns. The longer we've been thinking thoughts, the more we are doing an activity, the more myelin we have wrapped around these things. So literally, guys, it's like the choice of walking through an animal trail in the woods and driving on a superhighway. We're going to choose the superhighway all day long because it's simple, even if the superhighway doesn't support us anymore. Does this make sense? So this is why it's so hard to explain to people, unless they've had the exact experience of it, that we're not our thoughts. Our thoughts are simply just patterns of consciousness, a construct we've built in this brain, and that we ride all the time because it's simple. So, and it's the same level on this inner circle, the innermost circle beyond, just out from that, feelings. Remember, feelings, like I presented my dad, it was a feeling, it was an emotion I had. Like feelings are these fleeting, like they come up, they go down. Emotions are the more like longer term. This is a more of a steady state experience of what a feeling is like. I hated my dad. I was in resentment for a really long time. When I decided I needed to forgive him, the question became, who am I if I'm not feeling that? But remember what we said yesterday. If it can be taken away from you, it's not you. Think about thoughts. Thoughts come and they go. Right now, you've had a couple thoughts, you've had stories. I guarantee you've played out stories in your head as you've been talking, but now they're not there. That means your thoughts are not you.
Yeah, I have a question about that. Can I ask a question real quick?
Yeah, for sure.
So this was something that last night I was thinking about this, how if it can be taken away from you, it's not you. So let's just say hypothetically somebody, because it's not just what we believe about ourselves, it's also what other people say about us that may not be accurate, may not be true. So how do you in your mind, how is it when someone's saying something about you that you know is not accurate? How do you wrestle with that? Or how
does that come into play with all this?
yeah, how do I understand inside of my own mind with my inner roommate that I know that's not accurate and I know that's not true about me? So does that make any sense to you about how if someone's saying something about me that I know is not true, and if it's not me, then how does that relate to that?
It's a slight tangent, and just because it goes back to the 4 boxes yesterday. They can be saying it to me. They may believe it's true about me. It's just important for us to not believe the shit that they're telling us about ourselves.
Right. Or if they're telling someone else, like I'll give you an example. Like say someone says I'm a thief.
Yeah.
I steal. That's my vice. And they not only they don't necessarily tell me directly. They tell other people that.
Right.
And then those people, say to me, hey, this is being said about you. It's like, I have 2 girls, 17 and 20. So, these are things that kids deal with a lot, but we all do. Anyone does. I'm dealing with something myself. So this is why I'm trying to let go of something that someone has said about me that I know is not accurate. And everyone else who knows me knows it's not accurate, but it's like still up here.
Yeah, no doubt. But that's speaking more to like integrity and my personality and the qualities that I possess, that I want to present, that someone else is then like literally trying to chop down my integrity and telling me I'm a thief, or telling me I'm like, I only care about money, or telling me I like somehow, like this was called into question for me in the beginning of my yoga teaching career. A student who was practicing all the time came out and wrote a note to me and said, are you a yoga teacher or a yoga instructor? Because there's a big difference. Oh, that fucking pissed me off. I wrote 8 different emails that I erased and wrote again, like just lashing back at her, because what she did was it was an affront to the core of who I am, who I thought I was. That's when you get triggered, it's still this process, because I am holding an identity of myself that they are presenting a counter vision of, and I have to deal with it. Now, there may be like a conversation like, that's not me, and don't spread that information because I don't appreciate that, and blah, blah, blah. Like, there's like libel and slander and all that stuff that you get in the legal world. But my point is, it's still presenting, when we're on that level, it's still on the ego level of like, this is who I believe I am. Now, I want to live in integrity. I want to be honest. I want to be truthful. I want to do what I love and let that love be an expression of my best self. And I come up short. But like, it's still like, this conversation is related to that, but it's still like, we get to the point of this, like when I go into feelings and then I go into pure awareness, like this sense perceptions, thoughts and feelings, this makes up the content of what my personality is. But here's the thing.
Who I think I am.
Who I think I am. It's on the level of ego, which we all have, and I'm not trying to kill it. Otherwise I'd end up on a park bench for 2 years doing nothing and sitting in bliss. Not my reality. Go get it if that's what you want. I'm softening this stuff so that when someone says something about me, I can stand up for myself, but I don't make it about me. It's about them. This is tough because this is interpersonal stuff. And when especially when you're fragile, when you're young and you're like going through high school and your reputation is like everything to you. And then someone talks shit about you, they bully you, or they like, oh my God, it's like the end of the world, right? But what we're saying is that when you can witness this pure awareness, when you have that experience, all of a sudden this softens because you recognize that I have feelings, but I'm not my feelings. I have thoughts, but I'm not my thoughts. I'm the one witnessing the thoughts. I have all these sense perceptions. I even have this identity of myself, but that's not me. Even on the level of I have a body, my body is not me because it will be taken away when I die, which means there's something that will remain inside of me, this witnessing presence that will remain. This like, and it goes back to like, energy can either be created or destroyed. There's something inside of you that will not be destroyed when you die. This is my belief. We're getting into like a little bit of philosophy here, and if I'm contradicting something you believe in, let it be. The point is, when you get here, we'll talk about it later because we're about to get on and start practicing. When you get here, what it feels like is what we're going to talk about next, which is samadhi. And when you are able to practice that more and more, what people say about you and what they think about you means less and less because you've experienced your truth. You don't need other people's opinions to guide where you are in life. And that's so valuable. So valuable.
You know, and the last thing I'm going to say to this is that the way people judge us and our behavior is what we're also doing to ourselves a lot of times. We're judging ourselves for our behavior instead of realizing our integrity. There's a difference between behavior and integrity. I've lied before, but I'm not a liar. I try to hold to truth, but I've lied, right? I've stolen before, but I'm not a thief. I've had behaviors that are not good that I needed to have in moments to teach me a lesson that I needed to learn, but that's not who I am. That's not my integrity. And this is what we tend to do with other people is we judge them based off behavior and talk about them, judge them as if we're talking about their integrity. Does that make sense, guys? It's like this is the huge difference, right? Okay, gotcha. Okay. That's where we're going to leave that one. We're going to jump into samadhi. We're going to jump into samadhi when we finish. Maybe we'll do it right before meditation. Maybe we'll see. I'll have a discussion with the CEO here. So let's get ready to practice. Jump off of this and then jump onto the other Zoom room. Get your space set up. We're going to rock and roll and practice. Cool. Thanks, guys. We'll see you in the other room. In the meeting, Chris.